My name is Peter Dudley. I am Big Sky Watershed Corps member, an AmeriCorps member through Montana Conservation Corps, serving with Montana Audubon. And my work is primarily on the citizen science projects and the conservation ranching projects through Montana Audubon. And here is the rest of the policy and science team. I don't know if you all want to introduce yourselves right now, but feel free to.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. My name is Bo Crease, and I'm the avian specialist for Montana Audubon. I have a joint position with the Montana Natural Heritage Program. And even though I'm doing a lot of office work during the winter, in the summer, I usually get to go out and play and do a lot of field research. And I've been doing that since 2005 when I started studying at the University of Montana in Missoula. I've been doing field work ever since. And thankfully now I'm not doing any field work outside because it's just brutal out there. I hope everybody's keeping warm.
Hi, I'm Amy Seaman. I'm our Director of Policy and Science up there with Bo in the picture, helping direct these programs and give us a new direction, always looking for these new opportunities. So I appreciate these two of the crew jumping on to help share some of these programs with you all. And as Peter shares that slide again, so we have a pretty small crew, but kind of mighty. And we've been working with the Big Sky Watershed Core program for a few years now, and I'll let Peter, when he gets back on, say, if you want to talk about that program at all. But that's a partnership through Montana Conservation Corps and Montana Audubon, so that's been really great. So Peter's actually our third staffer to take that position, and next to me in the photo there is Carmen Borschelt, who has moved from her Big Sky position to actually participate as our conservation legislative assistant. So she's helping with a lot of the legislative work and policy issues we're following right now. And then down in the bottom, maybe your left side, is Tori Chuliak, another partner position that we share with Pheasants Forever and NRCS to work on our conservation ranching program. So she's our range and wildlife biologist, actually based out of Billings. So thanks for having us all and letting me say hello.
Great. Sorry about that. Can you all still see my notes when I do this? I just need to, can you see my notes?
Nope.
Okay, great. Perfect. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I'll just give a brief overview of what Montana Audubon does, and I'll talk generally about citizen science and yeah, about what you'll be participating in with the backyard bird count. So Montana Audubon is an independent statewide organization. We were founded in 1976 with a mission designed to be carried out through our education, policy, and bird conservation programs. As you can see up there, the mission is to promote appreciation, knowledge, and conservation of Montana's native birds, other wildlife, and natural ecosystems, and to safeguard biological diversity for current and future generations. So we do that a few different ways. Firstly, through education, primarily through the Montana Audubon Center in Billings. We also do a lot of public policy and advocacy work. Amy heads that up, and as an advocacy organization, we've been very active in influencing public policy. This actually was how Audubon got its start in 1976. It was to lobby. And we've been lobbying at the legislature ever since. Other public policy efforts come in the form of action alerts, working with wind companies and other energy companies to safeguard key species, a focus on invasive species, and issues like land use policy and clean energy. And then through our bird conservation programs, that includes citizen science, climate watch programs, which we'll talk a little bit about later, and even through conservation ranching programs too. So yeah. That's a general overview, and we'll be talking more about citizen science and our montanabirdsurveys.com, where you can learn more about previous surveys, submit data. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, I'll be talking about what is citizen science, what does it take to be a citizen scientist? Really, it's just noting and recording observations of the world around you. Many of us talk about citizen science as if it's a new concept, but it's really just the act of using your senses noting observations and asking questions. One standout example is Henry David Thoreau, the famous writer and environmental proponent who meticulously recorded first flowering dates, first leaf dates, and first arrival dates of migratory birds while living in his cabin in Massachusetts. This type of study and others like it take the pulse of plants and animals in the natural world as they respond to change over time. Whether it be seasonal or over many years, this study of nature's calendar, or phenology, is central to our understanding of issues that affect ecosystems and even people. This could affect production of plant allergens, the timing of pesticide application, when you need to worry about your garden getting frosted, or the pollination and water cycles. But today, with highly specialized scientists in dozens of fields and the wide variety of mass communications, when we think of citizen science, the picture is a little bit different. The idea of citizen science has evolved into a collective that encompasses two main ideas. One, being experts reaching out to non-experts to contribute some type of data to a current project or research question. Or number two, an educational tool to increase an individual's scientific literacy and involvement in the scientific process. So we're doing a little bit of both here. Yeah. And continuing with what is citizen science, there's actually a surprisingly long history of collaborative endeavors by amateur citizen scientists. Some of the oldest examples are the 640-year-old record of wine harvest dates kept by French vineyards, or 3,500-year-old record of locust outbreaks in China. One of the oldest citizen science projects in the US is the National Weather Service's Cooperative Weather Observer Network, which was started in 1890. And the program is still running today and is the linchpin of weather forecasts, long-term data on minimum and maximum temperatures, snowfall, wind, all that. Yeah, and just as the face of citizen science has changed with our available communications, so has the scope of our projects. So they can be international, national, regional, or even in your town or neighborhood. And though we talk mostly about naturalist projects, there are many others, such as transcribing old data from ship logs about past climates, to investigating how stars are born, to searching for cancer cells. Many of these projects include aspects of analyzing historical records or so much data that an individual scientist can't do it all by themselves. And before I get carried away with that, I want to switch back to ecological citizen science projects and why they're relevant to you. So the very first modern citizen science project to systematically use participants for a predetermined purpose is the Christmas bird count. Started in 1900, so we just completed our 120th year. This particular project evolved out of what was known as the Christmas side hunt, where groups just went out and shot as many birds as they could. Frank Chapman of the original Audubon Society, after noticing the declines in some bird species, proposed a new and less deadly tradition, and that's the first count. It had 27 observers at 25 sites, and they found 90 species. The project grew and grew, and then exploded in the information age, bringing the stats of the most recent count, or actually the stats in 2014, to 71,000 participants, and counting 2,400 sites and over 24 million birds in the US and Canada. And what are scientists or researchers able to accomplish with citizen science that they otherwise could not? The overarching answer is that scientists and researchers are able to ask large-scale and big picture questions over a long period of time with the enlisted help of dedicated volunteers. For example, the currently accepted classification system throughout the world is a result of amateur scientists contributing plant and animal specimens, descriptions, fossils, and observations to one man, an amateur expert, Carolus Linnaeus. He's painstakingly organized his collection with the intent of creating our current classification system known as the binomial nomenclature. So if you've heard of genus or species, that came through citizen science and is a part of what we're all doing today. So what can we track and what do we track as a result of citizen science projects like the backyard bird count? they continue to help us answer really big questions, looking at population growth or decline, looking at invasions, different trends in bird species, migrations, or even disease among certain populations. For example, we could look at invasions of Eurasian doves, pigeons throughout the United States, or we could look at decline in a certain blackbird species across the US. But we can also look at it through birds' relationship to environmental pressures that can be displayed in their phenology, the colors of birds, whether that's pollution or habitat loss, climate change, land use changes, precipitation, etc. And this slide kind of speaks for itself. Observations are really valuable, and we're excited that you all want to help out and get engaged. Which also leads us to, where does the data come from? It comes from you, it comes from me, it comes from all of us going out and looking around and taking notes. So that's the end of the citizen science portion, and I think Bo is going to take over shortly. But yeah, thank you.
Here we go. Thanks, Peter. Can you guys hear me? And thanks, Peter, and thanks everybody for joining us. That was a great overview of citizen science. So let me share my screen here. And bear with me. Alexis. Hold on, I'm having some issues. Sorry, everybody.
It's just your computer connection.
I think I just have I'm having a slow connection here. There we go. Wait, what is this?
Go to the top side. Click on the top side.
Okay, here we are. Sorry about that, everyone. Thanks again, Peter. And my portion of the presentation is going to be a little more specific about eBird, how to eBird, and about the Great Backyard Bird Count. And we highly recommend that everybody uses eBird for this. And even though you can also use other platforms like the Merlin app, eBird is a lot more comprehensive. You can add a lot more information, and you don't have to enter just a single individual at a time. So before I start with that, I want to encourage you all to check out some of our citizen science effort at Montana Audubon. So if you go to montanaAudubon.org, which is an awesome site full of lots and lots of knowledge, news, information, conservation policy. But if you want to learn more about the citizen science opportunities, go to Birds and Science here. That'll take you to this page where you can click on citizen science. And it'll then open up this page, and you can go to montanabirdsurveys.org. You can go straight there as well. But here we talk about various projects that Montana Audubon is involved with. Some of them are ongoing projects that have been happening for almost 10 years, if not longer. The Black Swift project is actually not a citizen science project, but that's one that Amy has been working on, I think, since 2014. It's a great project where we go into the backcountry of Glacier and also the Yak and the Bitterroots, and monitor waterfalls for breeding black swifts, which are a threatened bird species that is especially susceptible to climate change issues. If we don't have as much snow, we're not going to have as many waterfalls, and black swiftness only behind large waterfalls in the backcountry of some rugged mountains. Some other projects that we have going on that are for volunteer citizen scientists is the Chimney Swift project, where you monitor for chimney swifts in eastern Montana. There's the Audubon Climate Watch, which looks at small nuthatches, chickadees, feeder birds. This project is actually almost over. I think Monday is going to be the last day for the winter session, but we're also going to have a summer session. And some other projects we have going on is great blue heron rookery monitoring. And that started last year and has been a great success. And there's harlequin duck surveys. I think that's not a citizen science project, but another citizen science project is a long-billed curlew monitoring, where we monitor populations of curlews in the Blackfoot Valley, in the Flathead Valley, and in the Helena Valley. And we highly encourage you to go to this website and read a little bit more about these projects if you want to participate and help out with citizen science. There's all sorts of interesting opportunities, regardless of what's your favorite bird species. And it's just really fun to get out there and participate. And it's also very helpful. Another thing the Montana Audubon does is we have the Montana Audubon Center in Billings that offers a lot of educational and citizen science opportunities throughout the year. We take groups of students, adults, everybody who's interested can go to the center and be involved in a number of different projects. For example, the Montana Audubon Center is involved with Nest Watch. I'm not going to read all the details here, but you can read it. This Project Feeder Watch. There's several other ones. And of course, the Great Backyard Bird Count is one that has been going on for a few years and will be going strong again this year. If you want a little more information about the Montana Audubon Center, please contact our volunteer coordinator, Emily Chilcote, for more information, or go to the montanaAudubon.org/center website, where you can find a ton of information and articulate it a lot better than I can do here. So the Great Backyard Bird Count, which the Audubon Center in Billings is involved in, and we are, and hopefully all of you will be involved in, is a really cool project that was conceived of in 1997, and actually came before eBird. Now it's tightly linked with eBird, but researchers from Cornell University and the National Audubon Society decided to try to get a snapshot of how birds are doing during the winter in a little bit of a different way compared to the Christmas bird count. The basic goal was to develop a program that will allow people to share their love of birding while contributing to our scientific knowledge and understanding of bird populations. The Great Backyard Bird Count was first carried out a year after they came up with it in 1998, and it was deemed a great success with more than 14,000 checklists submitted. In 2020, 22 years later, participants around the globe submitted a whopping 249,000 checklists. These came from 194 different countries, almost every country in the world. I think it's 196 countries in the world. So almost every country submitted a checklist. This is an amazing, incredible effort that can teach us so much about bird population trends around the globe. The project started using the eBird platform in 2013. And even though it originally was focused on backyard birds and birding, and now participants are encouraged to go birding anywhere and everywhere. A lot of people go out into the mountains and do trails and drive around, and wherever you want to do the great backyard bird count, you can do it there, and it'll be great data. So here's a few numbers, because I like numbers and statistics. This is the results from last year, from 2020. As you can see, 6,900 species were recorded. Now consider that there's about 10,000 bird species in the world, and 6,900 is incredible. 2/3 of all the birds in the world were detected. Some of these birds are endemic and in really tough to find places and very elusive. So this is a huge number. 249,000 checklists. Look at the increase from 2019, almost 50,000 more checklists. Hopefully this year, with your help, we're going to get a lot more than that. 268,000 participants, which I find incredible. Let's see. I'm loading the next slide. It's taking a little time. Okay, there we go. Right. Sorry for the hiccups. Okay, so a little more numbers. In the United States, 169,000 checklists were submitted. We're number one. Woohoo! I was really impressed that India was number 2 on the list with 26,000 checklists. Several from Central America, where there's the greatest, Central and South America is where there's the greatest bird diversity in the world. I think the number 1 country when it comes to number of species reported last year was Colombia, which also has the greatest numbers of bird species. And I think they reported 1,100 different species, and they have about 1,200 different species in Colombia. The US reported, I think, 660 species or so. So here's a list of the most numerous species from last year. And number 1 was snow goose. All of these species are generally flocking species where individuals can see enormous flocks. Some of them are not in Montana, but some of these are obviously species that occur in Montana as well. I think the Redwing Blackbird is supposed to be the most abundant bird in the United States. And you can see him number 5 on the list here. So if you want to participate with a great backyard bird count, eBird is by far the best and recommended way to participate. The other platform that you can use is the Merlin. If you're just starting out, you may want to do that because the Merlin app can be very helpful with identification. The problem with the Merlin app is that even though I'm not very familiar with, I hear some things, and I think you can only submit 1 individual at a time. You can't enter large counts. If you see 200 coots somewhere, you can only enter 1. I may be wrong on this. eBird is way more versatile than the Merlin app and is actually really easy to use. So I hope most of you, and I would encourage you to use eBird. And as you will see in a couple of seconds, it's really easy to use it also. And really doesn't take much to learn how to use it. In fact, the tutorial is going to be so simple because we don't want to get into the weeds with eBird, which has so much potential. You can do endless amount of things with eBird. And oops, sorry. And so we're going to keep it simple here and just give you simple instructions on how to get started. And near the end of the presentation, if there's time, I'll show you a video of how to use the eBird app. But what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of minutes is how to use eBird on your PC. So when you settle down and ready to watch your backyard, or you went on a hike and recorded a bunch of birds on a piece of paper, or however you want to do it. Again, we'll talk about the app in a few minutes. But if you have a paper list, because some people like to do that, or if you're sitting at a window entering birds as you see them, go to eBird.org, or what we would recommend is for you to go to ebird.org/Montana, MT, ebird.org/MT. This is the eBird portal that Montana Audubon runs, and it's different than the national eBird.org website. I'll talk a little bit about it in a second. Now, hopefully some of you are already familiar with eBird and have an account registered in eBird. So if you participated in any of these here on the bottom right, the Great Backyard Bird Count, Merlin, Bird ID, Project Feeder Watch, Nest Watch, Celebrate Urban Birds, you already have an account. All of those are linked together. And so if you have an account and you don't know your password, you can always go to sign in and retrieve your password or your login. It's very simple. If you don't have an account and you're not registered in eBird, just go to create account right here. And it's very, very simple. I think you only have to provide 2 or 3 fields of information about yourself. And you can also submit anonymously. If for whatever reason you don't want to use your name, you can also do it anonymously. So this is what the Montana eBird homepage looks like. The numbers you see here are my numbers. I'm actually a fairly new eBirders, so my lists are not as impressive as some other people's. But the Montana eBird site has all sorts of things that the national eBird site doesn't have. You remember, again, ebird.org/Montana. So for example, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page of Montana eBird, you can find all sorts of fascinating articles about birds and birding and conservation in Montana. This is just a screenshot of the part below the previous screen right here. And so this, for example, is a fascinating restoration project in Odell Creek in the Madison Valley. I was involved in this project. Amy was too. And there's a great write-up by the Bird Ecology Lab. And they provide most, if not all, of the write-ups on the Montana eBird site. So when you log into eBird or ebird.org/Montana, the Montana one, this is going to be your home screen. And on the Montana eBird home screen, you'll be able to do all sorts of things like submit observations right here. You can search for specific species and birding hotspots. If you go to explore, you can go back to all of your checklists and photos and dive into fascinating statistics, personal statistics, which get really addicting. Seeing your species list grow and all your checklists and photos, if you submit photos, you can go back to all of it. There's bar charts and graphs. It's really, really fun and kind of gets addicting for a lot of people. And then you can also read Montana specific news, like I mentioned before. So since we want to prepare for this weekend in the Great Backyard Bird Count, let's talk briefly about how to submit observations on the PC. So, what is this? Oh yeah, to participate, all you need to do is log on to eBird on your mobile device or PC and submit a checklist you recorded while bird watching for at least 15 minutes. They're asking for at least 15 minutes during the Great Backyard Bird Count window from February 12th until the 15th. So once you're a registered user, do the following. Go to ebird.org/Montana and then click on Submit right there. Then you have to enter your birding location. So if you're just starting out, you won't have a drop menu here with all sorts of options. But if you've eBirded a lot, then you'll be able to choose from here if you're going to a location where you've eBirded before, like your home, for example. Otherwise, the best thing to do is to just find it on a map right here. So in this portion here, you can just enter Montana. You can't get specific here and enter a street address in the first part here. Just enter Montana, click on Montana right down here. The next screen you'll see is going to be this one. Here's the outline of our beautiful state, and all the red marks here are hotspots across the state. So you can actually find hotspots where you can go birding. And these don't necessarily mean, hotspots don't mean that there's a lot more birds there necessarily, but it means that a lot of birders go to these locations, which usually means that there's great birding there. So once you're at this screen, you can actually enter a very precise address, location. You can enter latitude, longitude coordinates, and it'll take you straight to whatever location you're birding at on the map. So as an example, excuse me, I entered my birding trip yesterday, which wasn't very fruitful, as you'll see. So you can enter the address here, or you can also zoom into the map if you prefer to do that. eBird tells you how to do everything. So to zoom in with a mouse, you just hold Control and you can zoom in and out, or you can use the plus or minus signs here in that top left corner. I just entered the address. I was over at Spring Meadow Lake in Helena, and this popped up. This is an exact location where I went birding. And as you can see, this is next to Montana Wild too, that are hosting this. But you can see this is a hotspot. So you can either put a new point down or click on a hotspot if you're going to be at that exact location. And this is what I did. I just used the Spring Meadow Lake hotspot, clicked on it, and then go to continue. Your next screen is the date and effort screen. So enter your date, and this is required. It won't let you move on without it. And then you have to decide on what kind of observation you're gonna report. Are you traveling? Are you walking a trail around a lake? Are you stationary, standing in one location? The historical one is not as useful. It's if you want to enter old checklists that you found or you have in your notebooks. But for the Great Backyard Bird Count, that's not going to be handy. Or you can do incidental. Incidental observations are ones, birds you encounter when you're not birding. So you're driving down the highway, you see a bald eagle standing on a cottonwood above the Yellowstone River, and you want to record it, so you can do an incidental observation. But the ones you're likely to use this weekend are traveling. If you're traveling, you'll be prompted to enter the distance. So you can say about a half mile or however long you traveled. And if you're stationary, just looking out of the living room window or whatever, then select the stationary area here. So next screen is where you enter start time. It's on a AM PM clock, duration, party size. So what I did was I started at 10:45 in the morning, did it for about 45 minutes. I usually enter the 45 here, and then I realized I didn't actually bird for 45 hours, and then I correct it. I'm not sure if eBird flags that or not. I think they do. And then enter the party size and any interesting comments. So yesterday was brutally cold, -5 degrees, and there was very little activity. Once you fill out these fields, you can go to the continue and go to the next screen, which is the actual checklist. The easiest thing to do here, instead of going down this big checklist that will have most, if not all, of the species that you can expect to see at a given location, the easiest thing is, instead of scrolling down the list, just start typing the bird species that you want to record right here and jump to species. So I saw a black-capped chickadee, and I started typing black-capped. There's a little drop menu. Click on that. It'll take you straight to this place on the list where the black-capped chickadee lives. I enter the number. I saw 3 of them. If you want, if there's anything interesting happening or if it's an unusual observation, we would encourage you to add details here. Just click right there. And so I did that, and I added that the 3 chickadees were foraging in willows and ducked when a merlin flew over. And of course, because I saw a merlin, I will record the merlin as well. I typed it up here. It took me right to the merlin box. And then I just noted that it was a flyover. At that point, so those were the only 2 species that I saw, only 4 individuals. It was cold and miserable. And so at this point, you can submit your observations. Click on submit, and you're going to see this screen right here. Now, nothing in eBird is set in stone. If you want to add photos or do something after you already submitted a list, then you can always do that, even weeks later. In fact, the add media, if you want to add photos, you can only do it after you submit the list, as far as I know. But if I took a picture of the merlin, I'd be able to upload the photo to eBird. And that's really cool because it ends up at the Macaulay Library in Cornell. And they keep track of, they keep all of the images, and they keep sound recordings. And it's, I think it's the largest sound library in the world. And I'm pretty sure it's the largest library for bird images in the world. So you can always add photos. That's always encouraged. If you forget something, oh, thank you. See, it's that easy to do it on the PC. If you do forget something, you can always go to this little box here in the upper right. And when you click on it, you'll get all of these options in a drop menu. You can delete the record. You can edit the location and the date and effort. If you realize that you misidentified something, you can go back in here and edit the species and do all sorts of other useful things after the fact. Nothing is set in stone. So one thing to remember when you're, that's pretty much it, by the way, with the PC. It's super simple. I just have a few notes here that are especially important for beginner birders and eBirders. Remember that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A lot of times when people start out, they'll enter a species that shouldn't be there. A lot of times it's by mistake. If you do see something really, really cool that shouldn't be there, it's not in the right season. If you enter unusually large numbers, if the bird is out of range, like if I report a cardinal at my feeder on Saturday, eBird will immediately flag these questionable records and request additional documentation. Sometimes you'll be approached or you'll be emailed by actual eBird reviewers that will ask you for more information. So again, if you see something really crazy, make sure that you document it really well and provide pictures. And here, if you see a yellow warbler at your feeder and it's minus 10 degrees outside in February, it's an incredible observation. You better back it up with as many details and photos as possible, or else it's just going to be basically tossed out because it's not credible. So back it up if you're going to report something really cool, and hopefully some or many of you will see some cool birds. So this is how simple basic eBirding is on your PC. And that's all you're likely to need to successfully participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count. Now, if you prefer to use the eBird app on your mobile device and you have little to no experience with the app, I recommend you check out the official how-to video from the folks at eBird. And to get to that video, and you can go to the birdcount.org, which is the official website of the Great Backyard Bird Count. So you don't have to go and do it through here. You can do it through this website. If you go to participate here, then it'll basically just connect you to eBird. It's not going to be a different interface or anything like that. It'll just take you to eBird. But what's cool about this website is that it has additional background information about the Great Backyard Bird Count and all sorts of instructional videos and a lot of good resources. So how are we doing on time, Corey? Can we show a 4-minute video, 4 or 5-minute video? What do you think?
Well, we do have some questions, Bo. Are you okay answering a couple questions that came in?
I am okay with that, but I do have, let me just go back and skip a few slides and go to a couple of slides that may answer some questions.
Okay, perfect. And we'll get to those questions if they don't get answered.
Yeah, give me just a second. Okay, so here's some important tips and frequently asked questions. I think I just have a couple of slides that can be helpful, hopefully. And then we can get to questions that haven't been addressed. So for general eBirding and Great Backyard Bird Count eBirding, it's very important to note the start time, duration, and location. That's always really important because that way researchers and scientists can link your observations to all sorts of other covariants, such as what was the weather at the time, and were you in a densely populated area, or what was the habitat around where you birded. So it's really important. So if you're recording birds on a piece of paper, make sure you have these start time, duration, and location so that you can enter it later. You can still enter observations in a different way without these, but it's really important. I mentioned before, you can also use the Merlin app, which is a little inferior to eBird in a bunch of different ways, but also is easier for beginners to use. So there's no need to do any sort of registration for the Great Backyard Bird Count. All eBird lists submitted during this time period from the 12th to the 15th will be automatically designated as Great Backyard Bird Count. You don't have to do anything. Just go to eBird and start recording birds. Remember that if you're unsure of the ID, don't count it. Or if you know it's a sparrow, but you're not sure what species of sparrow, eBird allows you to enter like a sparrow species or a duck species. So if you see a bunch of ducks and you're just not sure, but you want to enter them, then you can enter 45 ducks under duck species. And you can just enter this duck SP or sparrow SP or whatever it is into your little search box in eBird, and it'll pop up. But again, especially for beginner birders, remember that eBird is legitimate scientific data. So if you're unsure, we like to say if you're less than 95% sure, maybe 90% sure, then it's probably better just not to count the bird, or keep it to the family, if you will, sparrow species, a duck species. And another important set of details is that this, I think I already mentioned the top one here. A lot of people are concerned about overcounting and don't want to count birds twice, which is a correct thing to be worried about. We want every bird to be a unique individual. So how do I know I didn't already count this chickadee? A lot of times around feeders, you're gonna see birds come and go and come and go and disappear and return. And we don't wanna end up with a flock of 104 chickadees at your feeder, because obviously it's the same one or two individuals. So when you're watching feeders, all we ask is that you record your best estimate of the highest number of each species seen at one single time. If you're traveling, do your best to avoid double counting. So if over the course of, let's say, a 15-minute count, you see a chickadee come and go, but all of a sudden there's two of them, that's going to be your count for the chickadees. If you see two of them at the same time, don't continuously record the same individual or species over and over again. You just want the highest number of each species at one single time during the time period. You can also submit, and we encourage you to submit checklists multiple times throughout the day or throughout the weekend, even if it's from the same location. If you want, you can do a 15-minute count, and a half an hour later, do another 15-minute or 30-minute count from the same location. That's not a problem. And you need to treat each checklist as an independent one of the previous one. Meaning, if you saw two chickadees before and you stopped your count, and then an hour later you started another count in the same location, if that's what you want to do, and you see two chickadees again, don't worry about the fact that you probably recorded them before. Each checklist is independent of the previous one. And one last thing I'm going to say before we go to questions or the video, whatever you think, Corey, is that if you go to this website, birdcount.org, that I showed you previously, and right now you don't see a lot of stuff that will only be shown once the event starts. So for example, as you probably saw here at the bottom, remove this. You can see a live submission map in real time that'll show your checklist and the checklist of everybody around the world as they get submitted. And it's really cool to see like these lights blinking on all around the world. And then if you pay close attention and you have two screens, you can submit your checklist and actually see your checklist pop up on this live submission map. You'll see all of a sudden from Montana or from Helena or whatever. I'm not sure what the scale is on this global map. I don't remember. But you'll see a little light blinking as soon as you hit submit, which is really cool. And it kind of links everyone together. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to add. And I haven't been paying attention to the questions, Corey. Would you mind?
You did quite a good job of answering pretty much all of them, I would say.
Oh, good.
One that I see here says, can I count a bird that I can ID by sound, even if I don't see it?
Absolutely. And that for a lot of species, maybe not so much in the winter, but for a lot of bird species, sound ID is actually better than visual ID, because the songs are, in many cases, if you know bird song and calls, a lot of times they're going to be a lot more distinct than visual ID. Like for our fly catchers in the summer, can be really tricky to identify the Empidonex fly catchers. But if you know their songs, it's really easy to tell them apart for the most part. So yeah, if you hear something, that's perfectly fine. If you hear a nuthatch behind your house, but you don't see it, that's great. And a lot of times also you'll be able to count more individuals that way, because you may hear a bird and also see one at the feeder, and you know you have two birds. The sound is not coming from the same location that you're seeing the individual. So use sound. If you know their songs in the call, that's great.
Perfect. And then, yeah, the others you touched on pretty well. You know, folks wanted to know if they could watch their feeders for the count, which yes, you can. They were concerned about not accurately identifying, which you said, don't count it if you're not sure. And you mentioned how to deal with birds kind of flitting around and a big bunch of chickadees in your yard, recording, you know, the most you see at one time.
Let me add something about that.
Yeah.
If you were walking a trail, I forgot to give an example. Last week I did a trail around Helena, and as I was going up the trail, I recorded. A lot of you may know that in the winter, our small resident winter birds hang out in mixed flocks. And so as I was walking along the trail, I recorded, I think it was something like 34 mountain chickadees that were parts of 6 or 7 different mixed flocks. And eBird immediately, I think as soon as I got to 30 or so, they flagged it and they said, please provide more information. This species is not typically seen in giant flocks. And so in these instances, if you're traveling, it is important to make sure that you're not recording the same birds over and over again. So pay attention to where the birds are. So if you noted 3 chickadees and you only walked 50 yards, looked around, and all of a sudden there's 3 chickadees right next to you, but you don't see the previous group, then there's a good chance they're going to be the same one, the same group of chickadees. So do not record those. In my example, I was paying a lot of attention to that. I don't want to overcount. And so I made sure that the next group that I saw was about, I think it was about a quarter mile distance from the previous one. I walked pretty fast. While I was walking, I noticed that the flock was not following me. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they kind of move around with you when you travel. But be fairly conservative. And if you are fairly conservative about your estimate, then also you can mention that in the details. So I should have done that before I submitted or tried to submit. Just make a note of and do be careful about it when you travel. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Well, I think it would be great if we could show a couple slides of common bird species that people might see just before we head out. If you want, I could transition.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Let me just show you one thing, because I know some of you are going to want to use your mobile devices. I'm not going to show you the video because of I'm yakking for too long here. But let me just show you that if you go to the birdcount.org and go to participate, to this little arrow, and go to click on using eBird mobile, it'll take you to this screen. And this video is absolutely fantastic and can explain way better than I would have been able to how to use the app. It's super clear and concise. So please check it out. And I think it's even easier to use the app when compared to the PC version. But sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Sure. Yeah, I could go ahead and share that those couple slides while we're
Let me
wrapping up here.
let me stop my share here.
Sure. Well, I just wanted to say too, as a recent transplant to Montana, I came in with very little knowledge of the native species. I'm from the East Coast, so I knew some of the overlap that we have here. But for me, really learning the birds here came down to guidebooks and apps. And you know, Audubon has the Merlin app, which can be helpful, but really, I think their main thing is like you submit a photo of a bird and it'll spit out what it could be, or you could put in some details about it. But I found that some other apps where you can use like a dichotomous key, you can say, okay, this bird is 8 to 16 inches and it's gray and it has a white belly, and it'll spit out the birds that it could be. I found that using apps like that, you know, eBird is one that I've used. I don't want to confuse you all with eBird and iBird, but I've been using iBird for years, and it is like as expensive as a guidebook, but it is more useful than a guidebook for me. But I also know that Audubon has a free birding app too for bird ID that is supposed to be just as good. I'm just not experienced with it, but I highly recommend checking out bird ID apps and guidebooks if you feel unsure about what you're looking at in your backyard. So if everyone can see this, we have some common species grouped by family. I don't know if you want to elaborate on these a little bit, Bo, but yeah, these are actually some of my favorite. Northern flickers, I saw them all the time while working on a trail crew out in the Flathead last season, and I always thought they were brown, like totally from a distance they look brown with a white tail, and I kept wondering, what is this elusive big brown bird with a white tail? And it wouldn't show up in any of my guidebooks or any of my apps. And then I finally pulled out a pair of binoculars in Washington. I saw one from a distance, and I pulled out my binoculars and I saw that pattern on the wings, and I never would have seen that with the naked eye. But once I saw that, I said, okay, it has this pattern to the wings, and ID'd it immediately. Yeah, but it eluded me for 6 months because I wasn't looking for it right. Yeah, so it's fun to play around with different birds you see.
And we have a fairly, you know, we had a pretty mild winter this year until now. But for the most part, we have a limited set of birds in the winter. Obviously, we don't have any of the neotropical migrants and some other birds from the south. And so it helps a lot in a way, that you're not going to be confused by too many birds, especially if you're in town. There's not that many feeder birds.
These might be confusing. But,
so we have the black cap chickadees. The mound chickadees are probably the most common birds other than house sparrows at my feeder during the winter. Some of you probably know already that if you see a white eyebrow, then it's going to be a mountain chickadees. The black cap chickadees have a larger cap on their head, and they don't have an eyebrow. And those are the only two species you can really expect to see unless you're way up north by Glacier in the winter. And nuthatches are also pretty easy, white-breasted and red-breasted. The red-breasted has a dark eye line, and white-breasted does not. We also have pygmy nuthatches here. I think I didn't put a picture of that.
yeah, common corvids. I think you all know how to recognize these. I guess with the raven, it's the notch at the end of or at the beginning of the beak. Is that how you identify them, or?
So the raven has a way larger beak, and rictal bristles, the little bristles that cover the beak are going to be longer if you can see them through binoculars. But way bigger beak, bigger size. If you know, that's hard to judge sometimes. And if you see them in flight, the raven has a wedge-shaped tail, whereas the crow has more of a squared tail. And that's a really good field mark to look for if they're flying over you.
Awesome.
The magpie is pretty unmistakable. There's been a lot of Clark's nutcrackers around, at least until now, with snow conditions being snow levels being so low. They can stay in lower elevations and in areas that are, they can be just about anywhere they want when winter is not very harsh. So I've been seeing a ton of them around Helena. Also very distinctive looking bird, usually in ponderosa pines, sometimes in lower elevations, sometimes in Douglas firs. And of course, higher elevations, they love the white bark and the limber pines. They specialize in that. We do have some blue jays in cities and towns around Montana. They're a little more common now than there used to be. And I'm sure some of you have seen them at your feeders or have heard them around town. But a more common jay in Montana is the Steller's jay, which is more of a wildland kind of bird, more in the woods around cities and towns and up in the mountains.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then these are pretty easy to tell apart. We used to have a lot more, many more mourning doves than we do now. I don't know if that's an official assessment. I'm not sure if research backs it up, but that anecdotally, that's my experience. I used to see many more mourning doves, and ever since the Eurasian collared doves came in, even though people said that they're not antagonistic to the mourning doves, seems like there's way more of the collared doves and a lot fewer of the mourning doves that you see more in eastern Montana and like in open country away from cities and town. Of course, we have and the collared doves have a collar on their neck. That's an easy ID. They also have more of a squared tail, whereas the mourning doves have a very pointy tail, are more slender, delicate doves. And then we have the rock pigeon that we all know and probably hate.
Yeah.
I don't really hate any bird, by the way. I love all of them, including the house sparrows. So we have a lot of winter finches in Montana. The crossbills are pretty small. If you get a good look through binoculars, you can actually see the crossed beak, which is a diagnostic thing. They also fly in flocks and go pit, 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 pit. Pretty distinctive call. We have common redpolls in the winter in flocks, usually not so much in towns, but on the outskirts of town in open areas. And they have tiny little red caps. House finches are pretty familiar. The males are pretty unmistakable since we don't have a lot of purple finches in Montana. We also have flocks of siskins that you can see throughout the year and in the winter. Pine grosbeaks, the females, and I think the juveniles usually have this kind of yellowish head, and the males have a more vibrant red head. And then since the Great Backyard Bird Count is not just for your backyard, a lot of you hopefully will be out driving around, and if you see some patches of open water, which is, I don't know if you'll be able to find any of that after these frigid days, but there's a fair chance you'll see some coots. They overwinter. The golden eyes, the common and barrows they stick around in the winter. Canada geese, of course, and mallards. Just a small subset of the ones you may encounter, but probably a little more likely to encounter compared to some of the other ones. Barrows, as some of you may know, have the crescent shape mark on the front of their face, whereas the common goldeneye has a more round mark on the cheek area. And I think we have one more slide. And then, of course, we have some winter raptors. The little merlin is pretty common around towns and out in the open. Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks are woodland species that you see in towns a lot. They really like feeders, and a lot of times will come and eat my sparrows, which does make me happy. I'd rather feed a Cooper's hawk than a sparrow. And rough-legged hawks you can see out in open country around cities and towns. They're the most common hawk we have in the winter in Montana. Townsend solitaires have been very abundant around Helena this winter. Hopefully that's the case around the state. And of course, in the winter, we get large but eruptive flocks of Bohemian waxwings. In the summer, they move north and we get the cedar waxwings more frequently. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. I hope this was useful information and inspired some of you or all of you to actually participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count and start eBirding if you haven't done that yet. It's super, super fun and contributes a lot to science and research, and it's addicting.
Well, great. If we have time, I think we have a couple more questions too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to field those, Corey. Or...
Sure. Sorry, my dog's barking, so you'll hear him. So somebody said, I noticed on your screenshot when you were adding chickadees that the chestnut-backed chickadee wasn't in the list. Is there a place to add birds like this manually?
So I'm pretty sure you can just enter it. The list is the species that are most likely going to be in your area. And so it will omit ones that are less likely to be present. And depending on where you are, you may get a different eBird, I think they're called bird packs. And so if you were eBirding in Washington State, in Seattle or something, you'll see chestnut-backed chickadees. Whereas in Montana, where they're a lot less common in the winter and more common in parts of the northwestern part of the state in the summer. So I think that's why it wasn't on the list. However, you can still enter it. It just wasn't on the list, but you can still write it in. And it may get flagged because, you know, I don't know where you're from, the person who's asking the question, but in Helena, for example, it would be a very, very unlikely observation. So it'll probably get flagged and we'll ask for additional information. But yeah, any species that's not on the list, you can still just write in.
Great. And then a question that might be kind of fun for each of you to answer is, what is a bird that you haven't seen yet that you're most looking forward to finding?
That is a good question.
Peter,
do you
I
want
still
to go
haven't
first?
seen, yeah, I haven't seen a greater sage grouse yet. And most of my work, I mean, I will be working on citizen science projects, but a lot of my work will be focused on conservation ranching projects or in greater sage grouse ecosystem. And yeah, just looking at the pictures of them when the males are all puffed up with, I think it's yellow almost on their chest, they just look incredible. So I've seen plenty of like spruce grouse on the trail around the Flathead, but those look awesome.
Awesome.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to take you to some leks. I know of a bunch of them in Montana, so that'll be fun. There's just incredible to watch and to hear. I think mine would have to be in Montana, the mighty Jeer falcon, which has been my nemesis bird since I started going to school in Montana. I made probably 10 trips from Missoula to the Deer Lodge Valley in search of the Jeer falcon. I've never seen this bird. It's one of few birds in Montana that occur fairly regularly, and I haven't seen. And a number of times we got skunked, as a lot of birders say when they try to find something but they don't. So a number of times we got skunked, and soon after we got back to Missoula, or even we're about halfway to Missoula, we got a report that the bird was observed right where we were looking for it 15, 20 minutes later. And so that's definitely my nemesis bird, and Jeer falcon.
I was going to say the same thing, Bo. It's
Oh,
even worse because 2
yeah,
summers ago in Glacier, we had this mystery sighting, and I'm pretty sure that it couldn't have been many other things. And you went through the mental process that people go through when they are seeing a Jeer falcon, but they're trying to make it everything else. And then it vanished, never to be seen again. So I'm pretty sure I saw one, but I'd like to confirm that.
That hurts, especially for a summer observation, because that's a really unlikely one. So it would be very significant. Yeah, that's a
very late summer. Yep. That's what you say. It's always nice to have one that gets away. It keeps you excited and birding.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, that was some amazing information. Hopefully we've created some new backyard birders with this program. And just make sure all of you check out the Montana eBird site again for all of those amazing articles and resources. And if you're ever in Billings, check out the Audubon Education Center. And then if you're down in Helena, definitely swing by Montana Wild. We just created this brand new birding exhibit. So we have a ton of Bob Martinka's photos, who you saw plenty of those photos in this presentation, but we have a lot of Bob Martinka's photos on display, and then some taxidermy as well of all different bird species, waterfowl. So it's really useful to come in and see those close up. Can help with your identification. We also have a wildlife rehab center. We take in injured and orphaned animals, and mostly birds and raptors from around the state. So we have about 20 raptors that live at the center full time. They couldn't be released because of injuries. And so you can meet those raptors up close and learn a little bit more about them. And so, yeah, swing by Montana Wild. Spring Meadow Lake is right there. You can go check off an eBird list while you're visiting. And yeah, just huge thank you to the Audubon team for being here this evening. And if you have any questions, you should all have my email. I sent you all the Zoom link, so feel free to send me those questions and I can pass it on to the experts or answer it the best I can. But thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening. Stay warm. Happy birding.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.